Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk to you today about some of my latest research, but I'm going to start with a story that talks about a school. So they struggle with phonological awareness, they struggle with decoding print, they struggle to read, they struggle with spelling, etc. But for lots of those children in this school, their difficulties were undiagnosed. Okay, so what I mean by that is the parents had fought long and hard to get the diagnosis of dyslexia, and the teachers had done the same. But actually, for whatever reason, financial restrictions, etc., the children were not getting the diagnosis, despite demonstrating profiles that were consistent with dyslexia. So I'm just going to talk about the impact this then had on the school. Because the problem is that we assess children in schools, so we assess them in reading and writing, and we assess them in a very formal way, and we assess them, they have to demonstrate their skills in reading and writing to get those SATs results. And for children with dyslexia, and particularly for those children who don't get the diagnosis and therefore don't get the support, these children then underachieve, they don't reach their potential, they might be labelled as educational failures, and what is that doing to their self-esteem? Okay, so I tell the story of the last inspection of this school. The school had 15% of the children had a diagnosis of dyslexia, so that was quite high, but the school estimated that approximately 50% of the children had literacy difficulties that were consistent with dyslexia, but they were undiagnosed. So I tell the story of the inspection, and it's the point in the inspection where all the teachers are in the staff room waiting for the results of the inspection. So you've got to imagine that scene. Okay, this was a school that had thrived, it had a reputation for being inclusive. It was a school that took children that no other schools wanted and kept those children and supported them, but they struggled to get the diagnosis for those children. Okay, so these are the words of the deputy head teacher. The room is empty but full of people. Silence surrounds me, yet people speak. Friends are near me but seem so far away. Aware of every single heartbeat thumping in my chest, my breathing is becoming ever shallower. My head thumps, my palms are clammy. I feel distant from the frightened faces around me. There is so much to say, and yet I do not have the strength to verbalise my thoughts. I clearly recognise the physical symptoms of fear, and my mind and body swiftly respond to them in preparation for fight or flight. The next hour will be life-changing. It will confirm our greatest fears. The events of the last 48 hours play repeatedly and vividly through my mind. I relive every word I have spoken, every decision I have made, every explanation I have offered. I'm briefly distracted by high-pitched ringing in my ears and a deep sigh from a distant corner in the room. I swiftly return to my thoughts. How could we, as a school, have averted this devastating outcome? How could we have changed the course of events which had unfolded and would now impact on the lives of so many for so many months to come? I search deep inside my mind, but no answers are forthcoming. 48 hours earlier, life had been full of optimism, which was now crushed and broken like fragments of shattered glass. The buzz of excitement and energy was silenced. Smiles and laughter had quickly turned to pain, and confusion etched on the faces of those around me. We sought comfort by staying close to one another as the predator advanced towards its prey. She's talking about the Ofsted. I had been lost in my thoughts, and the realities of life had dawned on me as I looked up to view the unfolding reactions of my colleagues. Each reacted in their own unique way as I carefully studied each and every response. Young and old, we were sat together, each feeling the other's pain. Some sat deep in thought, others chattered, and there were those who calmly offered words of comfort and advice. Every response was intended to offer hope, but we knew that hope and time had run out. The door opened, and I knew the time had come to face reality. I made eye contact with no one and left the room with my head held high. I was now devoid of emotions. The strength to face the next few minutes of my life came from within, as I refused to regret my long-held views and deep-rooted beliefs about inclusion. We continued to enjoy the rewards of working with a wonderful, diverse mix of children. So, why am I so disillusioned? Why am I so frustrated? Why am I so angry? And why am I questioning my strong desire to work with the day-to-day challenges that I've thrived on for the entirety of my teaching career? And so the inspector came to call. And almost 2 weeks later, I'm of the opinion that she ripped the heart out of the school. As a teacher with so much experience of school inspections, I have never encountered an inspector who had seemingly made her decision before she'd even set foot in the school. The behaviour log was the evidence used against us. 19 incidents were deemed a concern. All incidents related to 4 pupils with undiagnosed dyslexia. To the inspector, there was a simple solution. The 4 children in the behaviour log should have been excluded. 3 of the children have previously been excluded from other schools before they came to Marshlands. We kept them. There's no opportunity to contest the decision the inspector made, and as a school we must now pool all our energies into moving the school out of special measures. The next 12 months will be filled with challenge, and the staff will face it with dedication and resilience. I have spent my entire career truly believing in and developing inclusive practices. My views and practices are deep-rooted and on a very personal level, and I must now question them. Do I respond by going against my strong beliefs, which will simply result in ticking boxes and playing the game? Or do I accept that I am simply out of step with the current measures of success in education? Schools are judged to be effective if they're getting high scores in reading, in writing and mathematics, and therefore for some schools, children with dyslexia pose a significant challenge because it can be a risk for the school performance indicators. And it depends on the commitment often of individual teachers as to whether they want to embrace that or whether they see them as a challenge or a threat. Fighting the system is futile, but believing in it is impossible. I write myself into this story because I was a school governor, and so we had to meet the inspector. Then it was my time. At 3:30 p.m. precisely, the governors went to meet an inspector. There were no introductions. The inspector went straight into interrogation mode about our low standards in reading and writing, and specifically about the low attainment of our pupils. We tried to explain the story behind the data. We talked about the diverse needs of our pupils and their very low starting point. We talked about their undiagnosed dyslexia. We talked about the lack of support. We stressed how we'd effectively supported pupils with autism and undiagnosed dyslexia and those with challenging behaviour due to undiagnosed needs. We talked about inclusion. All the time the inspector looked down at her paper, scribbled notes and continued with her own agenda. She raised the pupil behaviour logs. She questioned why 4 pupils with challenging behaviour had not been excluded. We knew it hadn't gone well. I'm left feeling disgruntled with education. I question my role as a teacher educator. What sort of education system am I preparing my students to enter in my role as a university lecturer? What will I say to them when they tell me they want to work in a school like Marshlands? And then back to my colleague. Many children have no language and never acquire language throughout the 7 years they spend with us. One child is John. John has spent the last 6 years of his life being educated by us. Initially, he walked through situations and experiences showing no emotion or recognition of the world around him. 6 years later, he's able to make choices of his own, he's able to access familiar resources, and he will, for short periods of time, engage with adults to support his learning. He smiles, he cries, he moves away when he's distressed. This is the way in which he communicates with us, and we've celebrated each and every achievement. It's unlikely that John will ever talk, but he's no longer seemingly locked into his own world. I offer such contextual information because John is by no means an isolated case in the school. Another child is Phoebe, aged 10. She's consistently struggled with phoneme recognition and decoding. She excels in art, science and music, but her literacy skills are well below national expectations. We cannot secure a diagnosis of dyslexia. James is 10, but his reading is at the level of a typical 5-year-old. He's bright, curious, inquisitive. His short-term memory is poor. He's frustrated, and this now shows in his poor behaviour. He feels that he's stupid in comparison to his peers, although we tell him he's brilliant. Sally is 11. She struggles with phonological processing, reading and writing. She's creative, but on paper she demonstrates the profile of a low achiever. She's working well below national expectations in reading and writing, and she has low self-confidence and has low self-esteem. Her parents have fought for a diagnosis for a long time along with the school, but so far we haven't been successful. My colleagues work hard, but we're seemingly faced with an endless barrage of must do better. Our aim has always been to develop the whole child. Our philosophy is now under scrutiny. However, I continue to have my own agenda, which is an agenda that attempts to support the diverse needs of the whole child. Roger Slee says, should we be asking inclusion into what? What are we including children into? When we see narrowing forms of academic curriculum, national testing, league tables, and inspection regimes which name and shame failing schools, it's hard to imagine the place for an inclusive culture. Dan Goodley says that this pervasive discourse, this focus on maths and English in schools, can have devastating consequences for children and their schools and teachers who might never be capable of nor interested in such academic achievements. Children might be brilliant. Dyslexic children might be really creative, they might be brilliant at art and music and science and a whole range of subjects. They might be brilliant at design technology, but where are those achievements recognised and celebrated and rewarded? Actually, if they're not doing well in literacy, if they're not doing well in reading and writing, they're deemed to be failures, they're deemed to be working below expectations, and what does that do to their confidence, their self-esteem, their sense of self? They end up being on the margins. Jenny Corbett argues that traditional caring practices of careful teaching have now been displaced within a marketised system of education which only focuses on educational outputs above relationships. So I started that account really by just talking about a school and talking about a school's commitment to supporting children who are neurodiverse, their commitment to supporting children with dyslexia and children who are not dyslexic but with reading and writing difficulties. And actually what that school did was they paid the price. But those children didn't get the support. If they've got an early diagnosis, if their needs have been identified early, and they've been diagnosed with dyslexia, maybe they would have got the support they needed to actually do better in their literacy. So back to the point that we made earlier about early identification. So that's just a different take really on my presentation. So what I'm doing here is I'm just going to talk to you about some of the research that I've done with children. When I started researching this topic in 2002, actually looking at dyslexia and self-esteem, there was hardly any research at all. And I thought, well, we need to find out, well, how does dyslexia affect children's self-esteem? Because then we can, if we understand the issues, then we can support them. But I was amazed that, apart from people like Neil Humphrey in Manchester, there wasn't much research. And actually, there isn't a great deal of research even now. I mean, it's growing a little bit, but there isn't masses of research in this field. So I'm just going to explore children's voices, because I've done my narrative bit, I've done it the wrong way around. So the published literature tells us that children with dyslexia have higher levels of anxiety and lower self-esteem in the school setting compared to children without dyslexia. They don't necessarily have lower self-esteem in other contexts. So, like when they're at home, for example, their self-esteem might be fine and their confidence might be fine, but particularly in the school setting, they have lower self-esteem. Children with dyslexia develop higher anxiety and lower self-esteem in certain contexts and settings rather than in their general living environment. So what I did was, what I've been doing for the last 10 years or so, is I've been going into schools and talking to children about their experiences of dyslexia and the impact it's having on their self-esteem. And I'll continue doing that. But these are some of the key themes that are coming out of my research. So the children are saying to me that they feel stupid, they feel isolated. Teachers can have a positive or negative effect on their self-esteem. So if teachers are supportive, then that's fine. They develop a good sense of self. But actually, they're still coming across teachers who are very negative towards them. They can have positive or negative responses from peers. They can experience bullying, for example, because of their dyslexia. But actually, what's coming through in the research is that, almost unanimously, parents are very supportive, and the parents will do absolutely anything to fight for that diagnosis and to support their child, to get their child the support they need. They're not always successful in that, but they will support the child. So I'm going to read some quotes now from the students. In primary school, they used to make us read aloud, and I always dreaded it because the others would laugh at me. I knew they were better readers than I was. I can't really blame them for laughing because they didn't know I had dyslexia, and at that point, neither did I. So this thing about reading aloud, children with dyslexia, we shouldn't be making them read aloud and drawing that public attention to the difficulties they have. But it's still happening, particularly in, for example, in guided reading sessions. Even when they're reading within a small group, they don't like that. And they get stressed, they get anxious about that. Feelings of isolation. It makes me feel like I'm the only one and nobody else has problems. I think, why is everyone else better than me? I felt left out because everyone was going off ahead and finishing their work. They would get to play games once they'd finished, and I'm still there working. I knew I had more problems than the rest because I was always the last to finish. So what they start to do is they start to make those comparisons with other children, and that can have a detrimental effect on their sense of self. I thought there was only me in the classroom that was struggling and finding it really hard. I pretty much felt I was stupid and I had something wrong with me. I wasn't confident. I wouldn't show anybody my work. Usually I just screw it up because I didn't want anyone to see it. So one of the issues is that they start to make those comparisons, and initially they just have a global sense of self. So they either think, well, I'm good, or I'm bad, or I'm brilliant, or I'm rubbish. And it's this global sense of self. And what they don't do at a very young age is they don't differentiate that sense of self. So they don't start to say, well, I'm good at English, or I'm good at maths, but I'm not good at English. But I'm brilliant at science, or I'm brilliant at art. That comes later. So young children develop this global sense of self initially, and that's how they view themselves. Teachers. I had one teacher for 1 year. My friend had her. She was really against kids who had learning difficulties. She was really mean to us. Like me and Jay were really good friends, and she was really nasty to us. She used to call us stupid and that we'd fail at this and that. Anything she could to be nasty, she'd say it for no reason at all. Some of the issues here with teachers is the pressure placed on teachers to raise academic standards, which are then transmitted to children. Because teachers are under so much pressure to get those results, aren't they? That they sometimes transfer that pressure onto children. She was getting on at me because I couldn't do the spelling test. She said, "You shouldn't be at this low level. You'll be kept in a break if you don't get higher marks." I mean, these comments really, made me so upset. We got this sheet of paper and it had loads of writing on it, and he asked us to read it. I said, "I can't do it, it's too long for me." He told me to stop moaning and get on with it. I walked out. This was a secondary school student. He's a teacher, I asked for help, and he told me to stop moaning. I needed help, and he's meant to be there to help me, and he wasn't. Well, I had this teacher called Mrs. P, and she really didn't understand. She was always telling my parents I was too slow. She used to bully me. I didn't like her. She used to get me in front of the class and humiliate me in front of the others. She'd make me sit in a corner and encourage the class to laugh at me. She was horrible. I can rant on about Mrs. P for ages. When it was playtime, she'd always given me extra work, and I'd never get a break. She'd shout at me and she'd call me stupid and a baby. The thing is, this was a secondary school student recalling a primary school teacher, and the effect that it had on him. They never forget, do they? They never forget a good teacher, they never forget a bad teacher. So we've got to think about the impact that teachers are having on children's lives. So the students talking about teachers, don't understand that dyslexic people haven't got a very long attention span. So giving us 6 courseworks to be done over the next week is difficult for people who haven't got dyslexia, but it's impossible for dyslexics. They don't give us extra time, they just expect it to be handed in at the same time as all the rest. So basically through the years, I've just helped myself. And that's what lots of children do, isn't it? They start to, through their own self-determination, they succeed. And through the support of parents, despite the system. But they're in a system that privileges academic attainment. They're in a system that is only valuing exam results and SATs results in reading and writing and maths. So if they're not good at reading, writing and maths, they're not able to demonstrate their successes. So actually what we need is we need to widen out, I think, what we mean by success. We need to have a broad range of success indicators, and we need to stop focusing so much on academic success in reading, writing and maths. I'm not saying that reading and writing and maths are not important, but actually we need to be enabling our dyslexic students to shine in music, in art, in science, in all sorts of subject areas, and we need to be recognising and valuing those achievements. Because what we do in the current system is, if they're not good at English and maths, then we say that they're a failure. We label them as working below expectations, and they carry that label with them, and that deeply concerns me. So we need to broaden out what we mean by success, and we need to give them opportunities to experience success in a whole range of subjects. The key issue for me, it seems, is that schools are judged on the basis of those scores in English and maths. So school effectiveness, what means an effective, the notion of an effective school, and what counts as an effective school, what constitutes an effective school, is about those scores in English and maths. So my argument is that a school is effective, or deemed to be effective by, for example, Ofsted, if it's getting good scores in English and maths. But my view is that there are other aspects that make a school effective, which don't seem to be valued. So is the child happy? Do they experience a sense of belonging? Do they want to go to school? Do they feel connected to the school? Do they like their teachers? Is there a good sense of positive well-being in the school? Is positive well-being promoted? All of that is important and counts towards what is an effective school. And it seems to me that we don't take enough account of those things, and we focus on academic standards, which actually can marginalise some learners with dyslexia. And they can be labelled as educational failures, and they carry that label. Some of the teachers have written for me in lessons, and they've given me encouragement and stuff, and help with spelling. They've been generally supportive. So some of them talked about great teachers, teachers who'd inspired them, teachers who'd helped them. And that's what we want, isn't it? But we need to train our teachers and make sure that they are skilled up during their initial teacher training to support a whole range of learners with a range of needs. There isn't, even in initial teacher education courses now, there's not enough focus. Right, so I was asked to do a session with my trainees, and somebody said to me, can you do a half-an-hour session on dyslexia? And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do it. It's just not sufficient. I can't do justice to the topic in that time. It needs a full module, and it's got to be done properly. So there isn't enough professional development for very new, early career teachers. They talked about their wonderful parents who'd fought long and hard to get them a diagnosis and to support them. So she was always with me, and when I first found out, I cried. I don't know why, I just did. It was like I was upset. I just thought, I'll never be able to spell and stuff. And I didn't want to tell anyone I was dyslexic. My mum told me not to be ashamed of it. She said it's not a problem. Because actually, what we should be doing is we need to promote an affirmative model of disability, where we positively see neurodiversity and different disabilities as a positive, and as a positive aspect of someone's identity. So we know that dyslexic learners have many, many strengths and talents. We know that they're brilliant, they have brilliant minds. We know that they think laterally. We know that they're creative. We know that they can do lots of things that other people can't do. And what we need to do is, rather than seeing labels such as dyslexia as a negative, we need to see them as a positive. Just like we need to see autism as a positive, and we need to see, any label, we need to start seeing as this is a positive because it's part and parcel of your identity. And we don't want to wipe it away. We don't want to erase that identity. We want to celebrate it and believe that actually diversity can enrich the world and make the world a better place. And actually it can enrich teaching. And what we also know is that good practice in teaching for children with special educational needs, children with dyslexia, is good practice for all children. So if we make our teaching multisensory, if we make it active, that's actually inclusive practice for everybody. If we do overlearning, if we get children to overlearn things, so we teach something, and then we revisit, then we revisit, then we revisit, that's good practice for everybody. So practice that we use for children with dyslexia can be used with anybody, and it's inclusive. Often what happens, I think, in schools is it's the other way around. So what they try and do is they think, well, this is the practice that we do with the majority, so let's just extend that to children with special educational needs. And I think it needs to be the other way around. So I've asked the students, well, what would help you? Because I think, well, I can't come up with recommendations. Who am I? Actually, the children know better. They're the people, actually, who can recommend how we can improve things. So this student said, I think if teachers knew a bit more about dyslexia, and they had a student in their class, they would know they were having difficulties, and they would know how to help them. I think that when teachers get trained, I love the way the student says this, I think that when teachers get trained, they should do a section on how to deal with dyslexia and how to help dyslexics in class. They need to do a full course on it, don't they? Yeah. It's really, really key. So we need to be thinking about initial teacher training and how well we're preparing our teachers. And I love this as well. I know that teachers probably won't like this because they like students to record all the stuff they do. But I learn more in a class like in citizenship, where you sit down and have a big talk. If you talk about it, you have more knowledge in your head, but you just haven't recorded it. When I write something down, like a big paragraph, I'm not learning anything. I don't read it, it's just giving me arthritis. So we need to be thinking about having a broader range of ways for children to record learning in lessons. So it isn't just about children writing down that learning. We need to get children, representing that learning visually. Let's get children making posters. Let's get children drawing things. Let's get children making videos. Let's think of a broader range of actually ways of how do we record that learning. There's far too much focus on recording in the written form, which can cause significant stress for students with dyslexia. Teachers can help us by slowing the pace down and not going too fast so that we can all keep up with the work. They should make sure that we understand it properly. They should have simpler worksheets to work from, like if we're doing a big story and we had to read loads of writing. What they could do is put it in bullet points instead of one big piece of text, and then it's not straining our eyes. They need to find out about the specific needs of the student. It's not the same for everybody. Tom Billington talks about frozen images. So he says that the problem with labels is that we say, this is a child with dyslexia, and then we look at them through a label rather than as an individual. And we start to think, well, they've got dyslexia, so therefore they need this intervention, they need coloured acetates, or they need tinted lenses, or whatever. And actually, it's not the same for everybody, because everybody has individual needs. So what we shouldn't be doing is just looking through the lens of a label. And how many times do we think about autism? And we say, oh, that child's autistic, they must have a visual timetable. Well, why? Actually, that child might not need a visual timetable. And that visual timetable, giving that child a visual timetable, may be having an othering effect on that child. It may be making that child out to be different. The child might need a visual timetable. But it's about talking to the child and finding out as an individual what they want and what would help them. And in my simplistic mind, I just think if we talk to children more in schools and just ask them what would help you, I think children can give us amazing insights into strategies that would help us to develop inclusive practice. Often we think that we're the experts as teachers or as educational psychologists or professionals. We think that we know better, but actually let's just talk to the children and find out what would help them, and I think that will take us a long way. I think teachers should make lessons more exciting, because I get bored and distracted. If I'm not interested or think the teacher is just droning on, I just doze into my own little world. I have to be excited, have to want to learn the subject. It's really important with dyslexic people because I think we have a short attention span. So we need to be thinking about how we break up lessons, not expecting children to concentrate for extended periods of time, how we can intersperse the lesson with activities to make it interesting and engaging. And actually, I think that's good practice for all children. I think another form of good practice is to space the learning out over time. So you might teach something, and then you might put something else in there. So you might move on to another topic, and then you come back to that thing that you taught, and you revisit it, but in a different context. And then you then go on to another topic, and then you come back to it again, and you revisit it in a different context. And this is called interleaving. So you're spacing out the learning over time, and you're interleaving that learning with other things, because they need to revisit and they need to overlearn. Zero tolerance. So it's more likely that if a kid goes, children are just honest, aren't they? They just say what they think. It's more likely that if somebody goes up to someone and calls them a racist name, it will get dealt with better than if someone goes up to someone and calls them a retard or backwards. I couldn't believe the students were using these words. But obviously they've experienced, peers using this terminology with them. And what they're saying is it's not always challenged in school. So it's challenged, some forms of discrimination are challenged, and this type of discrimination, if somebody's making fun of you because you're struggling with reading or writing, it isn't always challenged. And this is the bit that I really didn't expect to come out of my research, because I'd read a lot of literature about labelling, and in the academic literature on labelling there's a lot of critique about labelling. So there's a lot of stuff in the literature about how labelling can cloud people's judgment, how labelling can result in lower expectations, and how some children can use the label as an excuse. You know, I can't read because I'm dyslexic. But actually what the children said to me is that the label, the process of labelling, was the most important thing in their lives. So being told I'm dyslexic has helped me, yes, definitely helped me, because I have a label, I know I'm dyslexic, and before that I thought I was thick. Well, I mean, dyslexic people aren't stupid. It's just that they have problems and need help and just need some help. I just need some help and I'm fine now. And what they said to me is that the process, the point when they got the diagnosis actually changed their lives. Because for the first time, they'd gone through their primary education without a diagnosis because their needs were not identified. And they were basically told, you know, you're a slow learner, you're thick, you're stupid, you're working below expectations, and they really thought that because they'd internalised it. And then suddenly they realised, I'm not thick. I've got a specific difficulty. Actually, I'm really, really bright. But I've just got this slight problem that affects my literacy skills. And they all echoed that. They said that the label was really, really important. But the problem is, from the story that you heard at the beginning, there's not enough children getting the identification or getting the diagnosis. You know, we have people now who say who are claiming that dyslexia doesn't exist, who are claiming that the label isn't helpful, etc. Actually, what the children are saying is the label is critical. Absolutely critical to get that recognition and to get that diagnosis. Not just because it opens doors to support, but also because it helps them to understand why they find it difficult, and it helps parents to understand, and also it helps teachers to understand. So we have to challenge, I think, this notion that dyslexia is a myth, and that the label is unhelpful, because that isn't what I found in my research. Okay, I'm slightly early, but I'm going to leave it there. Okay, thank you.